All right. Hello, everybody. This is a particularly exciting episode for me to be sharing, and I'm going to talk more than I normally would, Cesar. And then I'll, of course, let you jump in, and I want to hear everything that you're going to share. But I don't know if you know this. I credit you as the reason that this show is in production and actually out into the world. I don't know if you actually know that.
I didn't. Thank you for saying that.
And I'll tell you why. So the way that Cesar and I connected, I was listening to a podcast he was on back in the summer. It's called This Is Actually Happening. It's one of my favorite story-based podcasts. And he was just, you were just so compelling. And I was so just moved by your way of storytelling, by your energy behind your words, like the whole thing. I was just like, wow. And I've listened to that show for years, and I listened to a lot of podcasts, but you were maybe one of 2 or 3 people that I ever actually went and looked up and followed afterwards. And so I followed you after I listened to the episode because I really was just so moved. And very quickly, you sent me a voice message. And then for weeks there, back and forth, you and I were just kind of connecting and talking life and business and getting to know each other. And then it must have been a couple of weeks into that, or maybe even a month or more, where I said, I was talking about how I had this podcast idea, and then we kind of left it. And then I brought it back around. And I said, I'm having some conversations with people who might be able to help me get it started. And if I do this, I want you to be on the show. And you were like, yes, I'll do the show. And you're like, by the way, I have a great editor and producer if you want to meet them. And I was like, okay. And so you introduced me to Glenn and Bessie, who are working on the show with me. And had it not been for you in that introduction, I just don't think I would have found the people who would have given me the confidence to move forward and really feel like they were aligned with my vision and believed in exactly how I wanted to do this show. So all of that to say, thank you for an amazing introduction. And also just thank you for being an amazing human who clearly desires to connect with people over the internet, near and far, and just for being so wonderful and so generous. So all of that to say, happy that you are here today.
Nicole, thank you for saying all of that. I am 1, bashful, 2, honored that you feel that way. I'm touched by that. And then 3, no pressure on me to just really knock it out of the park on this episode.
No. I've heard you tell your stories. Yeah. I've listened to your podcast, Beauty in the Break, and all of that stuff. I know you're a public speaker. You're going to be.
Yeah, no, I'm being totally foolish. I appreciate that. It's very touching. I didn't know how impactful that had been. And my job is literally just, what do I know about something that I found that works really well in this life? And then how many times can I share it with other people? I try to find myself, just open the front door and the back door, let the breeze go through as much as possible. And that's how I feel about good things, good information, good mantras in life, good people, and so on. So thank you for saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And, I consider really my kind of human gift to be a connector of humans, like me with people connecting other people. I used to sell my writing to help coaches connect with their people. And so you're doing that work as well. So I definitely see that reflected in you.
Right on. Yeah. This is what we should all be doing. We have way more in common than we have that divides us. And I want to get into that side.
Absolutely. Well, you have quite the story to tell, and we have a lot to cover. So I'm going to dive in, and I like to really set things up. The show is Spirituality for Skeptics, and I always kind of want to get to know a little bit about you, but let's start with describing the work that you do today, because obviously the backstory that we're going to get into is going to help us understand how you got into this work.
Yeah. So today I am a public speaker. I am a meditation guide and also a host of the podcast, like you said, Beauty in the Break. The things I do for people is, if I can break it down to the most specific as possible, I just help people remember how wonderful they already are by being more calm in their life, by being more peaceful in their mind, by being more kind to themselves, and then going out into the world and tackling the things that trouble us out there. I develop a practice and I speak on it as a speaker and as a teacher called growth mindfulness. It is the understanding of, let's get as rooted as we can in ourselves, again, in the peaceful, calm, clear manner, from us to us, from you to you, from an individual to an individual. So then when we go out into the world, we can have these mental models or mantras that I give during the guided meditations that help them take those out into the world.
That is beautiful work. And just remind me, how long have you been doing this work specifically?
So the public speaking has gone on for almost 2 years now. And the teaching the growth mindfulness has been roughly about a year. It started off as just teaching the meditation that I knew as a Buddhist. And then little by little, I got certified in mindfulness. And then I started giving talks on growth mindset. And I realized, wait a minute, these are two different sides here. One's the inner world. The other one is the outer world. Let me Google the word growth mindfulness and see if those two have been thrown together. And I couldn't find them anywhere, which I found to be kind of cosmically humorous because they're right there waiting to be picked up. So I picked them up and went. And that was about a year ago.
Love that. That's beautiful. Gosh. Okay. Well, I am going to let you start where you want to start. So give us the backstory. So you are teaching growth mindfulness. You are a Buddhist, but from everything I know about you, your background, your childhood was anything but full of growth mindfulness and peacefulness and that kind of thing. So yeah, tell us what we need to know.
I almost always start off by saying that today I am the most peaceful and calm and therefore happiest man that I've ever been. I can even go further and say that I am the most peaceful, calm, and happiest man that I ever even expected to be. I didn't know I would even get to this point. I say that because my childhood started off from the beginning. Started off with being a child of parents who are one, a New Yorker, Spanish father, and a Floridian Black mother. They also happen to be one, a Democrat, and the other a Republican. So I find myself as a child having so much of those two opposite worlds, multiple opposite worlds, culturally, gender, geographic, political, all separate. And both of them had their own ways of handling aggression, which is to say, not handling it at all. Mm-hmm. So my childhood was filled with a lot of violence. There was a lot of aggression. There was a lot of physical, emotional, and psychological violence. And that led to me never feeling at home with one version of the other because their respective families would also tell me the Spanish side would make fun of me for not speaking Spanish. One of them in particular would hold me down and squeeze my nose to make it pointy like a white person because it was too flat and round for them. And then the Black side, they always gave me a lot of crap for talking white, quote unquote, and listening to the music that I listened to. So I just never felt like I fit in anywhere. And then the parents, both of them, started engaging in some very aggressive violence with each other. And I grew up watching that. I seen one parent point a gun in the other parent's face while I was sitting on that parent's lap. I heard the threatening remarks. One of the parents would often try to have me taken in the middle of the park. They'd send somebody that they knew to come grab me and take me away because they were fighting over me. I was always on lookout as a child, had to be mindful of who was around me. The parent that I spent my time with primarily would go to work a lot, and they would work for the whole day. And sometimes they worked extra hours, so they would be gone for the weekend. So me, as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, I was just by myself in this apartment, completely by myself. So with that division, fueled with anger, it was presented, plated, packaged in the sense of isolation, loneliness. That was the groundwork, the flower bed of my childhood. And from there, those three things became the actual blossoming of my life. Being aggressive to the world, feeling divided internally, and then feeling isolated externally. Now, of course, when you put those three things into a child, he grows up to be a shining example of society, right? By the time I was in my early teens, I was not getting anything done in school. I was more and more aggressive. I had felt that the world was out to just, I don't know. I think I would say that the entire time I thought that there was something out there that just wanted to pick on me. And where I come from in Jacksonville, Florida, in the South at least, it has a phrase we say called the buzzard. I don't know if that's anywhere else outside of Florida, but
I
it's
haven't heard
like
that one.
you have not? No.
No.
It's like, the buzzard flying over you, just keep stalking you, waiting for you to die. It's just waiting for you, kind of consistently pecking at you. It's when things are going bad in your life. And that's how my life went for so long. And so finally, I end up getting into more fights in school. And I end up selling drugs for a while to make some money. And then I find myself getting into a gang. They sent me to the alternative school. And there's when I met this gang. These members were tightly knit. They were also intellectually curious, which is what really struck me at the time, because even though I was an aggressive person, I still thought the way I think now. Something settled with me in there. Something recognized me into this gang. It wasn't just about aggression and violence and illegal activities. However, not feeling a part of either of the families in my life, not feeling a part of anybody else in a society, this gang had no problem welcoming me to being who I was. And so I started selling guns more and robbing people and getting into gang fights and shootouts and all this stuff. Around that same time, I remember I had a girlfriend. And now I had met her when I was 6 years old. And when I saw her, my entire body and being had felt like I had known her before this life. Everything froze within me. Everything stopped within me, and not in a freeze of nothingness, in a stillness of the here and now. And she was 6 as well. So what is she going to pick up on that, right? Fast forward to me being 14 is when her and I started dating each other. And so I'm balancing this like deep feelings for this girl who's my age and these emotions while still trying to be tough and hard and aggressive and all that. And I'm juggling these two worlds over and over. When I'm 15, I get arrested and I drove to another town to pick up some drugs, drive it across back to the city that I lived in, and we got pulled over by a cop. Cops found the drugs. I had slipped a good amount of a different kind of drug in my shoes. 2 other cop cars come in about, 20 minutes later or so. And then that one gets out of the car, pats down my friend up and down, takes his shoes off and feels his socks and his feet. Now I'm there thinking, all right, this is going to get way worse because the drug they found was illegal, but the ones that they will find are really illegal, as in much more time. And I'm 15, but I'm not telling on myself. That was one rule we had in the South. It's a crook. You don't tell on yourself. Cop goes over to me, pats me down the same, literally gets to the shoe, my heel, to take the shoe off. And the first cop who pat us down yells to him, "I've already searched them." And he goes, "Oh, okay, got it." Now, I'm still not out of the woods, right? Because we're getting checked in and that's contraband and whatnot, but I'm not telling on myself. That's one of the codes. You don't tell on yourself or others for that matter. I'm sitting in this cop car with a bunch of drugs in my shoes, stuffed into these shoes. They were like those old high top Filas. You remember those shoes?
I think so.
Yeah. Well, it's enough for you to want to stuff things. You can stuff things in there. Anyhow, so I'm at this police station. They are fingerprinting us. Here is another kicker about it, is that the place I was arrested in was a small town. And I'm in the South in Florida. It's North Florida, so it's essentially South Georgia. They do not like people who look like me, my complexion. And it's a small town, so they're understaffed. And it's the weekend. The officer turns to me and says, "If you can get somebody to come in here and pick you up in an hour, we'll submit all this to the city, and they'll be in contact with you about court and or prison time or jail time and or probation and or whatever." Great. I dialed my phone faster than an operator from the 20s. It was ridiculous. So somebody picks me up. They go from there. I end up being put on probation for a while. And then everything really changed within that year. Because I'm on probation, I have the cops looking for me for other violent crimes that I had caused. And then the woman that I was dating, she had to move to Europe because her parents decided to leave. She moves to Europe. I'm completely heartbroken, but isolated again. I'm feeling even more lonely than ever. So, of course, I do the right thing. I go to therapy and I get myself fixed, right? No, that's not what happens. I just dove in more to what I thought I should be doing, which was more aggression, more anger. She did tell me when we turn 18, she's going to move back to America. So I spent the next couple of years selling drugs, selling guns, robbing people. And then because I was on probation, I was working this restaurant job to appease my probation officer. I save up enough money, somewhere around 17 or so. Some of the guys in my gang go to jail. One of the guys got really religious and was like, you know what, I'm going to go find my own life. And he disappeared. It's really hard to get out of gang. So this guy he just split. And then our superior went to prison. A couple other guys, they died. But the superior, him going to prison, not being able to maintain the organization, for lack of a better term, gave me a way to be out of it a little bit. Because by this time, police keeping an eye on me. I'm on probation. People who wanted to seek revenge for what I had done to their friends, their fellow gang members, whatever. I'm always on alert and always on edge. And I realized, you know what? This is not serving me. And I've only spent about an hour in jail for these last few years. If I'm this smart to get away with all of this stuff, what happens if I apply myself to something else? And there was a beautiful moment of that, a beautiful expression of the response of me putting that out into the world because that gang kind of dispersed. And at this time I was a Christian and I was one of those like, God forgive me for my sins while I still go ahead and sin.
Mm-hmm. So can I ask you, was that like, obviously that was, instilled in your life growing up. How did the Christianity kind of play out for you during your childhood up until that moment?
So as a child, my parents, both of them were Christians, but I will say neither of them ever pushed Christianity on me. But anytime I asked them a lot of questions, they would refer to God. Uh-huh. So I didn't have to go to church with them. My mother didn't go to church. My dad would go to church every once in a while. She was like Southern non-denominational, and then my father was Catholic. So I didn't get it pushed on me. But by the time I was about, I want to say 12 or something like that, I got a Bible on my own. I started reading the Bible. I prayed a lot. I don't know how far we want to go into this part of the conversation, but in addition to the girl of my dreams and the gang that I was in, somewhere before both of those happened, I had this very deep psychedelic mushroom trip that cracked me open in this existential way. And then I proceeded to be a gang member and a partner to this woman. So that got me in a very spiritual mindset also. But it played out in my teenage years to consistently think that I'm a sinner anyway. I mean, the Christian faith will tell you that you have sin within you naturally, and Jesus is the way out. It's this sort of like get out of free jail, or this life preserver for you. Mm-hmm. Is it to keep going to that, leaning into that, leaning into that? I didn't really give too much thought to those two sides. I just towed the line regardless. Sin and then ask for forgiveness. Sin and then ask for forgiveness. You can argue that that's kind of what can happen in certain lineages of Christianity.
We can go to the moment where you decide to leave that behind. I'm curious. You said the gang stuff, the stuff with the girlfriend. And was there like one particular moment that made you decide to shift out into atheism?
Yeah, there were an amalgamation of moments, one large moment, and then these supporting roles that kind of got river stream to turn into a waterfall per se. I was working that job and I met a guy who was there who was an atheist. And I remember thinking like, what's wrong with this guy? What's he talking about? It don't make no sense, And so we kind of went to just a conversation back and forth. And he said to me, well, they found Cro-Magnon, man, and there's a ton of data on evolution. And at the time in the South, this is the early aughts, at least in my circles, they were mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. Most people didn't believe in evolution or agree with evolution and also believe in Christianity or Jesus. They were separate. He and I had this conversation. He said this to me and I think to myself, whoa, okay, that's interesting. Still, let me go do some research and prove this guy wrong. So I'm researching and researching and researching. And by this time, I'm 17 years old. I have been isolating myself. I'm not in a gang. I'm not running the streets anymore. I got off probation, luckily, without seeing any jail time. And I'm going to work, going home, and playing a guitar in the cycle because I didn't want to go out. I had to let everything else settle down in my life for a while. But I got all of this. This is 2007. So I got the internet and I got Wikipedia and I got all this stuff I can read, right? So I'm like, let me go prove this guy wrong. I'm reading more and more and I realize, oh, okay, evolution is, I understand. It's been agreed upon that this is what happens in life. It's the way of life. It's the way of nature. Things change over time, small, little by little. And overall, when you zoom out, you see the large picture of the changes that happen in nature. Okay. I tried to toe those two lines as much as I could. I saved up enough money. I'm reading and studying and praying and learning about evolution and evolutionary psychology. And I find Carl Jung and I'm like, whoa, this is interesting also. And then just when I turned 18, I'd saved up enough money to move that girl back to America. And we had been talking online on AIM. Do you remember AIM?
I do.
Right. Everybody remembers AIM. Most people remember their screen name, but I don't remember mine. Do you remember yours?
I do.
Please tell it to me. Please share.
Well, it's Pearl Jam related. I used AIM to like meet Pearl Jam friends on the internet. Long story.
Okay, cool. Did you apologize?
When I was in high school.
Right on. Okay. So mine was, I forget what it was, but I had in her and I were talking and I told her, I have enough money to move you back now. I'm ready to start a life with you. I've cleaned up my life a lot. You come back here, I'll work a job. You can go to school. I have a car now. I'm ready. And she was going to turn 18 in the next month. And she says, nah, I don't feel it anymore. I'm not here for it. I think I'm going to stay here. And it just completely shattered me. Just shattered me in a multitude of ways because I had felt so abandoned as a child. And I had put so much love into this one girl as much as I could at that age. And then I was abandoned again by her. Somewhere in my psyche, I realized I'm just not worth anybody's time, I guess. Because why doesn't anyone love me? Why doesn't anyone want me? Same night when she broke things off, I had a collection of things that were hers that I kept for when she comes back. And I packed them up. I grabbed a large bottle of Hennessy that I kept with me and drove to the park that her and I used to go to. That was a walk from her place. And I buried all of that stuff. I dug a hole with my bare hands and it was about as deep as the length of my arm. I just kept going till I finally hit like a deeper part of the root next to a tree. And I raised the root upward and I fastened everything under the root to leave it there. I covered it all up. I sat there and I drank that bottle of Hennessy and I cried my eyes out. It wasn't just being broken up with. It was the realization again that somebody and everybody always leaves. And I felt really alone. It was no more than a few months after that I was just reading more about evolution and psychology, and I got into chemistry and I found abiogenesis, which is the study of how life forms derive from non-life forms. And that was the pivotal moment of saying, all right, you know what? There's no God here. I don't have any belief in any of this stuff anymore.
Do you think it was just, kind of putting the science side together, or was it also all of the trauma and the entire experience of life you had up to that point?
It is both. It is an amalgamation of both. I mean, anybody who understands the way nature works, I could see how somebody could take the step and say, well, that's just all there is. Fine, understandable. There's a dynamism to the mystery of the human experience. But some people want to just stick with the practical, testable side. Totally understandable. Totally get it. And I, at that age, can hide behind that knowledge and say, this is what it is and that's that. It's easy for an individual to say, this is the data, this is the facts, that's it, while still forgetting about all of the material that we don't understand about the human experience and our perception of the natural world. And then on top of that, psychologically speaking, or symbolically speaking, I felt alone in this world. So why wouldn't I also be alone in the external world? I thought to myself, well, if I'm alone here, then I'm going to be alone after I die. There'll be nothingness whatsoever. If there's nothing here, then there's got to be nothing out there. And it was a sort of, that'll show them projection in my psyche. And what came with that was more drinking. What came with that was more drugs. And I took a full revolt to everything that I had been given before. And I went to the far extreme. Drugs, drinking, sleeping around, not committing to any person romantically. And that is emotionally, mentally with them. Because I thought to myself, if I couldn't have her, then I'm just going to be here until I die, which I was very much ready for. So I am 18, 19, 20, just deepening more into drinking and atheism and drugs and promiscuity and so on. Now, I also want to make a note that atheism doesn't bring that on. That was the part of me that projected that into the ideology of rejecting beliefs of anything supernatural. There's plenty of atheists in the world who are fantastic people. Mm-hmm. But what it did for me, because I believe that our beliefs influence our actions, is that it brought out the version of me that felt most isolated, that felt like this meant nothing since I'm alone anyway. So why not do what I want? And what is it that I want? Well, that is baked in aggression because I hadn't done any of the work.
Mhm.
So, of course, my life goes into a destructive sense. But I worked a job and I had also saved up some money, and I was maintaining myself for the most part, in a way that I wasn't ruining my life, but there's a slow decline. By the time I was 20, this was in 2010, the housing market was just plateaued at the lowest level. It wasn't going down anymore. It plateaued. And Barack Obama had all these incentives for housing market and for the bailouts and so on and so forth. And my mother says to me, you should buy a house. And I thought, can I even buy a house? I didn't know there was an age range. I didn't know any of this stuff. And so she says, of course you can. Yeah, you just gotta be 18. She says, I'll send you my realtor. Connecting my mother from my past is to say that from when I was a child until I was 20, she made a drastic change. She got very, very religious. She lost a family member that was really close to her, her brother, almost like her first son, her little brother. And it just turned her whole life around. She went to church and it just changed. And then therefore her and our relationship changed as well. So she says, you should buy this house, son, or you should go look for a house. Great. So I started looking for a house. She is only helping me with the legwork of stuff. If I can't get off work to take a form somewhere, she takes it there. But not once is she saying, I'll help you. I will put my name on it, or I'll give you money. She's like, no, go do these things for yourself. So I was 20 years old. It was August of 2010, and I found a house and I was able to purchase my first home at 20. Business-wise, a pretty good choice. It was celebratory externally because what 20-year-old buys a house? I couldn't buy alcohol yet. I was drinking alcohol, but
especially given the life that you had led up until that point.
Right. Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. Thanks for saying that. Yeah. But moving into that house with the furniture, with the dishes, with the clothes, with the posters and the instruments and the televisions and all that, comes my depression, comes my isolation, comes the self-loathing that I have. I'm in this belly of the whale, for lack of a better term. I'm in this cave of my own self that I'm free to do whatever it is that I want. And the depression just grew. It just grew and grew and grew, and it got worse and worse and worse. And my actions got a little more unsafe as we go. Drinking and driving and sex work and selling my body for money and just doing things that for the sake of self-destruction. Metaphorically speaking, it's like taking your seatbelt off and just running every red light. So you're kind of hoping things just go worse instead of actively just doing worse. What's more is that anytime I would go out into that city, I met with all these relics of a previous life, right? And everything that happened to me as a child and everything that I had done as a teenager was just showing up in that city. So I decided I need to get out of here. So after 2 or 3 years, I rented out my house, packed my stuff up, and I moved 3,000 miles to Los Angeles. I moved to LA. I'm 24 years old. I'd never been here before. I didn't know anybody. And I slept in my car for about 2 weeks till I found a place to stay. And I went as a musician. I wanted to play music. And I didn't expect anything out of this city except finding a career as a musician. Over time, I was able to pick up physical training, and I learned boxing, and then I got certified. So I started teaching boxing as well to make money as a self-employed man while I'm trying to grow my music career. Still an atheist, of course, still drinking, of course, and now still sleeping around, of course, and now still doing drugs, of course. And because this is a large, massive city, all of my demons now are on steroids. About 4 years later, by that time, I'm in places I don't need to be in, around people that I don't need to be around, doing things with people that I don't need to be doing. And one night in particular, I was doing those things. And there was a woman that was there at this club that I was in. She and I had like a small conversation before. And then she talked to my partner who was there at the time as well. And it was like a friendly conversation, right? Nothing crazy. But about 10 minutes later or so, she turns to us and she kind of catches our eyes and gives us the head nod of like, hey, give me a hand here. This guy's being kind of creepy who's talking to me. So I walk over to her, put my arms around her, and we're like, hey, she's with us. She's a friend of ours, whatever. He didn't like that. A pushing match starts. They separate us. My partner and I go to leave. And while we're walking out, he went and got a group of his friends, about 3 of them. And they jumped on us from behind, knocked me down, knocked me unconscious, and continued to kick and stomp on my face and my body. They shattered my eye socket, my nose, the 4 front teeth, and my face were completely shattered and knocked out of my head. Bridge, that's just above your teeth. It's the gum line behind the top lip, shattered. Front of my tongue, the tip of it was hanging off, so the ambulance had to cut it off. My bladder was punctured as well, so the hospital had to cut me open, stitch close my bladder, and then staple my stomach shut. Even then, even in that moment, when I came back from surgery, even after all of that, when I came out of surgery, the nurse looked at me and told me what had happened. And I asked her if she could kill me. She said, no, of course. And I asked her again. I told her that I've seen enough in life and I'm tired. I'm just tired. I'm really tired. I'm 28 at this time, and I just felt like that was enough. Between my childhood and the gang and the girl and the drugs and the depression and the drinking and the house and the city and trying all of these things, these hats, to find some joy and some peace within my own self. Nothing was working. Nothing was fitting. None of those hats felt snug enough. It took me a while to heal again. But along that way, I realized something's got to change here. Something has to change. Because if I don't make those adjustments in this life, then I'm not going to see the end of the next year. Because it just keeps getting worse. I'm asking for death. It's not being given to me. Instead, I'm just suffering more and more and more. And so I remembered at some point that I told myself if I had to choose a religion, I would become Buddhist.
Oh, sorry. Can I ask you? So you're like going through all of this. I mean, for years, wanting to die, essentially, you know, having this brutal attack, asking the nurse, and what finally shifted you out of that? Is it what you're about to tell me, or is it something else? Yeah.
You know, what shifted me was the realization that I'm asking for this thing, I'm not getting it, but I'm here and it sucks. I went as far as you could go without dying and it didn't happen still. And yet here I am. And I will say that there's the question of why don't you just end it your own self, right? The entire time, anytime I thought of doing that, which was to say a lot, I would think about my mother and my sister and how they would feel and where they would be when they found the news out and how horrible that would be. So instead, I just went into life hoping it would occur organically, lack of a better term. So I realized that I can be an atheist and a Buddhist because there's a lot of Buddhists in the world who don't believe in anything supernatural. My ego is trying to preserve itself, right? It's like, no, you can still be this, but you can add this other thing. And I go into a Buddhist temple and I sit and meditate and I have this sense of calm that I never felt before, a sense of stillness that I never had within my own self. I had been chasing everything externally. And then we're in an environment, we're in a circle sitting and talking, and one guy brings up this nasty celebrity that people don't like in Los Angeles. And when he mentions him, I'm ready to like join in the group of like, you know, bringing this person down. And instead the man says that guy, he must be suffering. And it rocked me because I had only seen aggression match with aggression. And instead, this man took compassion. And instead of firing his own anger at this individual, who's not even in the room, by the way, instead of doing that, he just wanted to understand more of the psyche of the human who would want to hurt people so much. And I was like, all right, I got to give myself some of this Buddhism because this guy's seeing something way different than I'm seeing the world. And of course, I can keep my atheism, quote unquote. But that's just not what happens. The more I meditated, the more I realized the illusion of the thoughts that I was giving myself, or the thoughts that were given to me. The more I realized the illusion of identifying with my thoughts, my feelings, my actions. The more I realized that I am more than my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions. The meditation has you practice a focal point. When the thought shows up and distracts you, you just realize you're being distracted. And then you just guide yourself back to your breath. And every time you do that, there's this mental bicep curl that you can strengthen. Then when you're in your day, thoughts show up and they just pass by. And you don't have to partake in them. You don't have to identify in them. And I felt myself more calm than ever, more clear than ever. Then I found Joseph Campbell. Then I found Carl Jung. And I found the Upanishads. And I started finding all of these ways to look at the world. All things are projections of the mystery of the universe, of this human experience. And then when I got more and more still and more quiet, when I calmed down the chatter in my mind, is when I started to recognize the presence of what people would call God. I don't call it God, but for the sake of conversation, I would say that. I'd use that word. Or Brahma, or universe, whatever. And it's only until the mind quiets down that you find the presence of the mystery that we call God. And now there's no doubt in who I am as an individual, that I am of that.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm like, what is that experience like when you're engaged and you're in tune with God, universe, whatever you want to call it? I think it's always interesting to hear what that feels like for different people, because I think it's pretty individual.
I am torn between trying to explain it physically, because the moment you put it in a physical sense, then it puts a shape around it, right? So what does it feel? Whatever moment you just felt after I finished talking, it's that. It's silent. It's still. It is the vastness of looking up at a blue sky. There's no end to it, and you know it has an end as well. It's the understanding of the duality of life, thinking that something is one way or the other way, and then recognizing that they are the same. There's the feeling, this is why all famous figures use metaphor so much, because we're using metaphor to talk about the mystery that's unexplainable. Mm-hmm. You know, Heinrich Zimmer says the best things are unexplainable. The second best things are misunderstood, because you're trying to talk about the things that are unexplainable. The third best things are conversation. It's the mystery of the lack of words that we feel. It's a very heady way of explaining it, but there are no words to explain it. That's the point. The point is calming the mind. The point is separating yourself from your thoughts. And when you realize that you aren't your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, you are the awareness of those, that you are not the movie, you are the projection screen onto which the movie is being projected, that you aren't the necklace or the ring or the bracelet, you are the gold that's pretending to be a ring temporarily, that you are not the light bulb, you are the illumination. When you recognize that, it just changes how you see the entire world. You have no choice but to see it differently.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It sounds like you got to a place where you could be such an observer of what was going on for you that you kind of had all of these revelations and insights that you were then able to carry out of those meditations or those times where you just have a quiet mind and really into practice in day-to-day life, which I think is where so many people struggle with this type of thing. It's like, you know, whether you talked about when you were 14 having your psilocybin experience, or when you're in meditation, it's like really easy to feel those insights then, but it's that integration and carrying it into the world that I think is what you're talking about. So did that take you a long time to gain some mastery around, or were you just so ready to have a shift that it was like fairly spontaneous?
It's just a bit of both, you know. It has that process of a drop of water just dropping into the ground, and that becomes a little puddle, and that becomes a lake. So there's a gradual movement, but it's still slowly over time. And then eventually that lake has like an offset. It's a little stream, and then that stream becomes a river, and then that stream becomes a waterfall. It has all of the components a part of it. There is multiple times that I was sitting in meditation, and for a lot of it was in the quarantine during the pandemic. Gave me a lot of time, and I could see the gradual changes week to week, a little more month to month. And then there's some times where I was on the 101 driving, and visibly everything changed. Looking at things, just what I'm looking at, it shifted how it looked physically in my eyes. It was like seeing something in black and white and then just seeing it come to color, or seeing something that's bad quality on your screen and then all of a sudden the quality gets to HD. It just changed. And I've not seen it the other way since. It just looks like this now.
So interesting. I think I've talked with some of my other guests, not to divert too far off of your actual story, but, I think that so many people really wish that their spiritual growth, whatever you want to call it, was super obvious. Like I open my eyes and everything looks different all of a sudden, but it's not necessarily that way for a lot of people. So what do you say to people who are maybe in the types of practices that you were doing that got you to where you are today, but that are really struggling with seeing those changes in themselves, in the world, et cetera?
Yeah, stick with your practice. Stick with where you are and give yourself the opportunity to change if it happens over time, because it will change. Inevitably, things change over time. But when you feel confused, turn towards nature. Something as simple as the changing of seasons. It's not Saturday and then on the next day, all the leaves have fallen off and it's completely winter. It doesn't work that way. They slowly turn to yellow and then to orange and then to red before the leaves fall down. And then over time comes the winter. And it gets colder and colder. And then inevitably, little by little, it turns back over and becomes spring. And then you see flowers blossoming. And then you see more animals coming out into the world. And then it gets hot again. And then the cycle returns. There's no on or off switch. It's a gradual process. So give yourself that. Have your focus. It's like, I'm going to go for another metaphor here. It's like shooting an arrow. The arrow, you see the target. That's your goal. You want to apply tension to the bow and arrow. You want to pay attention to the target. You want to have an intention of hitting it, but then you gotta let it go. So both sides have to happen.
Okay, so let's go back. You're like seeing everything through a different lens. Keep going. Just enthralled by your story.
Yeah. So it is such a fascinating thing. It's not everything else I had took on. Everything else in my life I took on, like, okay, now I'm going to do this. Now I'll be an atheist. Now I'll do this. Now this revealed itself through me as a person. I couldn't control this one. It changed from within to the without. So I took that in my life and said, all right, well, what do I do with this now? Do I just keep this to myself? Because it's hard to tell people that they have something ready to be revealed within themselves already, especially since we've established already that in this Western culture, we have a religion that tells you that you have sin first. Buddhism and Eastern religions say that there's purity already lying within you. You just got to peel away the things that we've been told from society and that are based in anger and fear and desire. So I am going through these moments trying to figure this stuff out. I'm playing music. Music is going well enough, but not so great. But after all of this reading, I'm at a peak with being a huge Joseph Campbell fan. And his wife used to stay in a house over here in Encino before she passed away. And they do these Joseph Campbell roundtables. Joseph Campbell was a comparative mythologist who taught at Sarah Lawrence, who finds all the common threads in all of our myths, religions, and stories and lives that show we are all talking of the same one story, the human story. I go to this roundtable. The speaker there is someone who knew Joseph Campbell personally for 20 years. She gives an entire talk. She says, any questions? Lady raises her hand. She asks a question. Guy to the side of me raises his hand, asks a question. I raise my hand. I give a comment about something that stuck with me. And she cuts me off and says, stop right there. She goes to everyone else. Do you see what he did here? He took the story, found the symbolism, applied to his life, and then applied it out into the world. And he's now practicing it and exercising that. She said, you, sir, should be standing right here on this stage. I'm flabbergasted by that because I had no desire to be on the stage or any of that. I just wanted to share some cool stuff that I thought about what she said. Fast forward to her mentoring me on how to be a speaker, how to be a storyteller. And I started by renting a place, inviting 30 of my friends, one of them which is your producer, Glenn Milley, and filming the talk based on something that I want to talk about. Took the videos of it, clipped them out, and then just started sending them to places saying, I spoke at this place recently. I'd love to speak at your place. In the first year, I had spoken at 18 different places. From there, little by little, I realized I don't have to just tell my story. I can also remind people how precious they are in this. People wanted to hear my story or my perception of life. But going back to the Upanishads, there's a bunch of stories in there that they talk about that use beautiful metaphors of the mystery of the world. And almost always they end with saying, and you have it as well, because you are of it. So now I go about my day, my life as a speaker, doing the best I can to remind people how beneficial they are to the world, how helpful they are to the world. Because of a gangbanger like me with depression and suicide ideation and alcoholism and substance abuse and sexualized overdrive can find this sort of peace, calm, and therefore happiness, I think any individual in this world can do the same. And if I can help you find yours, then I've done my job.
I love that. I love that. I did want to hear the part of your story where they find your attackers and really how you handled that, because to me, that's one of the most exemplary parts of, your growth and really just being able to show who you are and who you've become.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, there's so many moving parts. Sometimes
I know it's quite a story.
So I am still healing from the trauma from the assault. And I am also meditating more, and I'm practicing Buddhism, and I'm understanding compassion, which starts off with compassion for the self first, by the way. Anyone listening, whoever you are listening, if you want kindness in the world, start with the kindness to yourself first. Otherwise, it's unrooted. It's a plant that's not rooted. It's sticking a flower straight in the dirt and just hoping for the best. Get your roots in yourself first. I started doing the compassion part for my own self. About a year later, almost to the date, the men who assaulted me got arrested. About a year and a half later comes their trial. The courts got in touch with me, asking if I would like to request from the judge maximum sentencing. Now, I went through a lot of emotions thinking about the men who assaulted me. At the very beginning, when it happened to me, some of my friends who live in LA who are from not so great neighborhoods asked me if they wanted me to let them find those guys. I went from a yes to them to I don't know what to feel about if I run into these guys in the future, to let me just work on my stuff. And then when they got arrested, I had kind of thought that maybe they weren't ever going to be held accountable, and then they got arrested. There's a bit of a joy of thank you. It's a bit of a justice that I didn't expect to have from the legal system. And then I'm standing in front of this, lack of a better term, red button that I can press. And I realize this is my opportunity for once to not meet anger with anger. Some would say it's justifiable that I could say, yes, give them maximum sentencing. But I know from me, if I did that, I will be doing it from a place of anger. And if I'm saying yes to that and allowing myself to still be a slave to my anger, then those men will still be living with me forever. And they will be beating me down every day for the rest of my life. Not just that one night. Because they will be in my head constantly. Because the anger will always be there. But instead, I realize the forgiveness of forgiving them is secondary. It's the forgiveness of myself first. That's primary. The weight, the physical weight of my body over time got lighter and lighter and lighter. Those men have been instructed. They went to jail. They got sentenced on their own because I said to the judge or to the courts, you find what feels most appropriate. I'm removing myself from it because I don't need to be a part of this tug of war. They've been instructed to not speak to me if they ever run into me and see me. And that's fine. And if any of them ever came up to me in need of help, I will be there for them. If they wanted to come and make amends, or if I ever just see them in distress, I will be there for them. Because they weren't even hurting me. They already were hurting themselves. They were coming from a place of anger on their own. Something in them hurt already to do that to someone else. And I don't want to be a part of that cycle anymore.
I don't think most people have it in them to show up and think in that way. It's incredibly admirable and, just an incredible example to follow. Thank you for sharing all of that for sure.
Thanks. Thanks for remembering that part. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to do a little summary for people. So you grew up in a challenging, traumatic, violent household. Very young, you got into drinking, drugs, gangs, violence. You had your heartbreak. You continued doing those things, identifying as a Christian, shifting into atheism. You go through this really horrific attack that almost ends your life. And then you merge really science and spirituality, and you find your place in Buddhism. And now you're teaching growth mindfulness and doing, what I would consider to be pretty inspirational speaking, sharing your story to help other people. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary journey there. So my question would be like, within all of that, if we think about, it can be with spirituality, but it can be really with your perception of anything that you've been through. Is there anything that you still feel any skepticism or resistance around, or do you feel very calm, solid, peaceful, in trust, in belief?
Yes, is the answer.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world of ever-changing things.
Mm-hmm.
You should constantly ask the questions.
Mm-hmm.
What is your intention behind the question? That's the better way to go about it. You should always investigate it. It's a Buddhist story in the Sutra of the Kalamas, Kalamas.
Mm-hmm.
The Buddha goes to a town and he's giving a talk. And the people, they're called the Kalamas, they say, "Sir, a lot of sages have came here and talked and said that their way is the way, and they've discredited every other way. How do we know what you're saying is the right way?" And the Buddha turns to them and says, "Don't take it because somebody else says it. Don't listen to it because authority says it, or because the government or the city, the thought of the time says it, or because logic and reason even says it, or because your parents, or because it's tradition, or because you just feel like it, or because your best friend says it, or because out of spite," and so on and so forth. He says, investigate it for yourself in your life. If it brings you peace and then helps you bring peace outward, take it. If it does not, discard. That opens me up to being a part of any and everything that I want, as long as it is serving peace in here. Not happiness, by the way, peace. If you search for happiness, that's subjective. Peace is calm. If you find that peace within and externally from whatever thing you are doing, that requires investigation, which requires skepticism. If you find those, then keep it. And what doesn't work, you discard. I'm skeptical every single day, without question, but it doesn't come from a place of, the word skeptic has such a baggage with it. Like every word over time, it will carry more baggage. It doesn't come from that place. I'm more investigative. Let's ask more. Let's stay curious. Let's find out some more information and see where this fits in the symphony of the world. Because every single instrument can fit in the symphony of the world. You got to find out how much it fits, where it fits. So stay skeptical, but remove the expectation of something being true or false. Mm-hmm. Just recognize curiosity will find you the working solution where you are. Life is over time. You stay still the whole time.
Yeah. So it's like skepticism in the name of growth, not in the name of trying to disprove something.
Right. Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah,
As from this vantage point of my life with where I am today, I have found that no matter what I've experienced and who I've experienced and what practice I've experienced and whoever I'm experiencing, no one is incorrect, but everyone is incomplete. Everybody has a sliver of something that is the reason why the world has worked this way. Your job is to find out what that percentage is.
Love it. I love it. And gosh, well, I think this is a good time to ask. Tell us where people can find you and learn more about you and all of the beautiful work that you're doing to help people find more peace and amongst many other things in this world.
One of my favorite things right now is meeting people and understanding who they are and helping them learn their meditation practice that works for them. So you can reach out to me and contact me at CesarCardona.com. And of course, you can check out our podcast. My partner and I, Foster Wilson, we run it with a producer named Glenn Milley and an editor named Bessie Fong, who are fantastic people, called Beauty in the Break. Stories of resilience during our breaking moments where we find the beauty afterward.
Yeah. And if anyone exemplifies being able to turn what could have gone quite a different direction into a beautiful outcome, it's you. And, you're so generous with your time and your energy. And I'm just so grateful to be able to witness you sharing your story in this way. And I just appreciate you and your work so very much. So thank you so much for being here, Cesar.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you very much.